Good morning, honorable members. As we begin our devotions with our Moments of Impact segment, I would like to share on this thought I've been thinking about the last days: to serve and not be served. There's a story recorded in the Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 10, about two brothers who desired to be in leadership for all of the wrong reasons. Mark chapter 10, verse 37 to 39 reads, "They told Jesus, 'When you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in the places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left.' But Jesus said to them, 'You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering that I'm about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of the sufferings that I baptize with?' 'Oh, yes,' they replied, 'we are able.'" These two brothers, like so many people today, desperately wanted to be in leadership for all of the wrong reasons. They wanted to be in leadership for prestige, authority, power, pomp, and pageant. These brothers didn't want to serve. Instead, they wanted to be served. After Jesus discerned their hearts, in verses 42 to 45, he called them together and said, "You know not what the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many." The moral of this story is leadership is not about wanting to be served, but serving. Even Jesus, who in my estimation was the greatest leader to ever walk on the face of this earth, came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for mankind. This is the quintessence of true leadership. In my concluding thoughts, honorable members, always remember leadership is not about prestige. Neither is it about authority or power, pomp, or pageantry. Leadership is about serving. The people of the Bahamas elected each of you to serve and not be served. I charge and admonish you today to serve the people with sincerity, honor, and dignity. Selah, think and act on these things. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the precious gift of life. Thank you for waking us up this morning and clothing us in our right minds. We give you praise, we give you honor, and we give you glory because you are well deserving of it. From the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, your name is worthy to be praised. Father, today we pray for our leaders all across this country. We pray that as they lead, they would serve and not expect to be served. Father, we pray that the leaders in our country would not be driven to lead because of their desire for authority, power, prestige, pomp, or pageantry, but with a genuine heart to serve. We pray for the mental, spiritual, and physical well-being of our leaders. We pray against stress and sickness and disease and untimely deaths. Spirit of God, breathe upon our nation leaders today. We cover their families, their homes, their vehicles, their businesses under the blood of Jesus. And we ask, Almighty God, that you would keep them safe from all harm and danger. Satan, the Lord rebuke you. And we pray that your diabolical plans for our leaders, they've been rendered powerless, and we declare them null and void. Lord, as our political leaders assemble in this place to discuss the business of the people, may your presence fill this room. We humbly ask for your spiritual guidance and wisdom. We acknowledge that you are omniscient, and we need you in this place today. We pray that your peace would be amongst us, and may only what is good for our country come forth out of today's proceedings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us repeat the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. First of all, forgive us for our tardiness this morning as we were preparing for our guest this morning. So that one is on me. My apologies. You know, I pride myself on starting on time. Um, this morning in the gallery this morning, we have several visitors with us, and I wish to welcome you to today's sitting, the members from the Governor General, and I would wish to read a communication from the Governor General. And it reads, the month of November has been proclaimed National Volunteerism Month in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas by the Honorable Philip Davis, KC, Prime Minister, Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Honorable members are aware that the practice of volunteerism has deep roots in the Bahamas, being as it was the accepted modus operandi and a way of life for survival for our forebears for many generations, particularly in the Family Island communities. The Governor General's Volunteer Bahamas, a call to action program, was established in 2019 to serve as the clearinghouse that will help individuals and volunteer organizations in achieving various service aspirations and goals. The Governor General Volunteer Bahamas exists to encompass, encourage, and celebrate those individuals and civic, religion, charitable organizations, and contribute resources and efforts without expectation of any reward. In this regard, parliamentarians and the community at large are invited to participate in planned activities as the spirit of volunteerism become more deeply entrenched into our lives as we together promote and advance the common good. They include 1. The National Volunteerism Day on Saturday, 19th of November 2022. The Governor General's Volunteer Committee will coordinate a blood drive at the mall at Marathon. All religious organizations, charitable groups, as well as youth groups are encouraged to undertake a special project on this day. 2. A national awards and recognition ceremony is scheduled for Tuesday, 22nd of November, 2022 at 5 p.m. at Super Club Breezes. A number of volunteer groups and individuals will be recognized for exceptional services to their respective communities. 3. A national essay competition will be launched for the youth of our nation. The Governor General's Volunteer Bahamas thanks all persons who have selflessly given of their time in the service of others and appeal to others to do likewise. Today, we have in our gallery all of those wonderful members, and I will name them. The chairman, and we'd like to recognize their chairman, Mr. Lindsay Cosino. Vice Chair Anthony Newbold, Treasurer Jeffrey Andrews, Youth Chair Alicia Robinson, Undersecretary Lisa Adderley, Public Relations Serena Williams, Public Relations Tommy Stubbs, and Youth Sports and Culture Kelly Brathwaite. We thank you for being here with us today. Also, honorable members, in the gallery today, we have Gandhi Pinder. Is she here? Yes, she is. Thank you. And today, I wanted to give a little background information on what she's here to celebrate with us. And today has been recognized. She would like for us to recognize National Kindness Day, where members in this honorable house will be kind to each other all day today. And with that prayer, I send up to God. I'm hoping that that can happen. So in 2021, this was inspired by a Lady Gaga kindness initiative. Bamboo Shack CEO and President, Mrs. Elaine Pinder, launched a local Be Kind Bahamas soft campaign. Bamboo Shack partnered with local radio stations to play ads and live reads, encouraging listeners to do the little things: smiling, feeding a family, donating to your favorite charity, say something nice to a stranger, and now to the House of Assembly, be kind to members. That can go a long way. Showing kindness has also been linked to significant health benefits, including mental health as well. It is our prayer that this message of kindness will resonate in the hearts of Bahamians, cause a ripple effect, and inspire others to be their best selves while helping others. So, honorable members, let's take on that challenge today, offered by Mrs. Pinder, and let's see how best we can be kind to each other. Now, before we resume, we have a lengthy debate ahead of us, honorable members, and I've just gotten my schedule, and I would ask members to refrain from detouring from what is in the front of us today, which is the Mental Health Act. All members, you know? So I want members to be admonished that I want to enforce that today, and anything that other members want to speak to outside of the Mental Health Bill or Act today, let's go down to notices for future meetings, and those questions can be put at that time. So that says today that Madam Speaker has no level of tolerance for that. So I'm being very kind to you, and I'm letting you know beforehand that the tolerance level for getting out of bounds is not in bounds today. Right, honorable members? That's my first act of kindness today. Thank you, honorable members. Let's move forward with the people of this country's business. The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, we have several communications, and of course, we've asked the members of the opposition to accept a change in one of the bills. The bill is related to disaster preparedness, and we will make that change upon arriving at that point on the agenda.
Okay, sir. Thank you, honorable member. Okay. Now we'll go down the order of business. Are we in the full agreements on that?
Speaker, we've been advised by the business leader for the government, and out of the spirit that Ms. Gandhi Pinder has brought here today, I will ensure that our side acts out of kindness, so that when we do tell that harsh truth, we do it with a smile, Madam Speaker.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, honorable member. Introduction and swearing of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the Central Bank $10 silver proof coin, Yellow Elder Order 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order the document be brought up.
Madam Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table.
Hold on, honorable member. Order that the document do lay on the table. Further readings? Continue, honorable member.
Yes. Madam Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table Central Bank $50 silver proof coin, Lignum Vitae, Independence 1973, 2023 Order 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Further
Madam Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table Central Bank $10 silver proof coin, Rock Iguana Order 2022.
Thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up.
Madam Speaker, sorry.
Order that document do lie on the table. Further tabling of documents?
Madam Speaker, beg leave to lay on the table of the House Central Bank $10 silver proof coin hibiscus, order 2022.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order the document to lie on the table. For the laying of documents, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Price Controlled Drugs Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2022.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. For the laying of documents, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill. And Honorable Member, we welcome you back.
Where was I?
I know you was out sir, for a brief moment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to introduce and lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the Health Services COVID-19 General Amendment Number 8 Rules 2022, the Health Services COVID-19 Prevention and Management of Community Spread Amendment Number 16 Rules 2022, and the Health Professions Council financial statements ending June 30th, 2020.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
I did, I signed it. How do I ever sign it?
One, two, three. Three missing. Order the documents to lie on the table. Further laying, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pinewood.
This is the financial statement. Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the financial statement for the Disaster Reconstruction Authority 2019 to 2021.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. For the laying of documents. Thank you, Honorable Member. Statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, numerous crypto tokens and companies around the world have collapsed in the last few months, including in that collapse are companies and tokens such as Terra Luna, Celsius, Three Arrows Capital, or sometimes they call it just 3AC, and Voyager Digital, setting off a series of financial shocks. As you know, the FTX group has one entity which is regulated in the Bahamas, FTX Digital Markets Limited. This entity's registration has been suspended and it was put in provisional liquidation. the FTX Group and affiliates all now appear to be subject to insolvency proceedings pending in Nassau and in the United States. There are reports that FTX has mismanaged customer assets, and numerous investigations have begun into the reported actions and the actors in several countries, including by our own Securities Commission and the Financial Crimes Investigation Branch of the Bahamas Police Force, Royal Bahamas Police Force. I note that the Bahamas did not have sole oversight of the FTX's worldwide operation. And I repeat that. The Bahamas did not have sole oversight of FTX's worldwide operation. I've given directions that the proceedings and investigations in our country are to be of the highest order and given precedence, given the amounts involved, and because committed and rigorous oversight is of national importance. We will be coordinating these efforts with duly appointed authorities in other jurisdictions. A key priority for us, of course, is the full and absolute protection of the rights and remedies of the Bahamas and our citizens, to minimize losses and to mitigate the overall impact caused by any misconduct. Madam Speaker, there have been both booms and busts in the world of crypto, and this year has been a significant bust, with total market capitalization falling from $3 trillion to 800 million or lower. The steep sell-offs and declining volumes have led analysts to describe this time as a crypto winter. Might I just point out as well that tech companies are also having its challenges. So, for example, Meta, which was Facebook, and Amazon, not crypto companies, of course, but tech companies, have laid off thousands and also shed significant market capital over the last couple months. So we have to recognize that these are challenging times. I believe, as to many others, that blockchain technology and smart contracts will continue to play an important and growing role in the world's financial architecture. And further, I have every confidence that the Bahamas will emerge from the proceedings involving FTX, proceedings taking place here as well as in other jurisdictions, with an enhanced, the Bahamas will emerge with an enhanced reputation as a solid digital asset jurisdiction. Based on the analysis and understanding of the FTX liquidity crisis to date, we have not identified any deficiencies in our regulatory framework that could have avoided this. In fact, it was because the Bahamas already had in place a regulatory framework for digital assets and digital asset businesses that the regulator was able to take the immediate steps that they have done in order to protect the interests of clients, creditors, and other stakeholders globally. The Bahamas was already on track to update the regulatory framework before year's end to address lessons learned as a result of this year's crypto winter. No doubt, as the various jurisdictions involved unraveled the actions that led to this moment, we will be among the first jurisdictions to gain and put to use valuable insights, allowing us to further strengthen our framework. What I would ask, Madam Speaker, what I would ask is for all those who care about our country's reputation to tread carefully when they speak about matters that are very complex and still unfolding. There's a reason that the Bahamas won international praise for the approach we have taken to date on digital assets. And there is plenty of room to have a healthy debate about the industry. But this is a story that has the world's attention. And those who use it to mislead and score cheap political points are no patriots. So I invite all of us, as I've said, just to tread carefully as we speak about this matter, as things are still unfolding. It's still unfolding. Madam Speaker. Yes. Yeah, that's done. Madam Speaker, I'd like to lay the communication. Yes. Yeah, I have my pen right here. Take my pen. Thanks.
Kindness. Order that the document be brought up. Thank you, Honorable Member.
Yeah.
Order that the document do lie on the table. Further communications?
Speaker,
You may proceed, Honorable Member.
I rise to speak to the government's fiscal performance for the quarter one of fiscal year 2022-23, and to lay the budgetary performance report and the press release that accompanied it when it was released. Madam Speaker, a few days ago, they would note that the Ministry of Finance released its budget performance report for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2022-2023. The report was produced as required under the Public Financial Management Act 2021 and supports the government's commitment to transparency and accountability in government finances. Madam Speaker, total revenues collected during the period amounted to $654.3 million, which is $57.8 million larger than the previous year. Total recurrent expenditure contracted or reduced by $47.8 million to close to $620.6 million. And capital expenditure contracted by $10.2 million to a total of $54.2 million. This has resulted in a first quarter deficit of for 2022-2023 of $20.6 million. This deficit of $20.6 million is the lowest first quarter deficit in more than 10 years. I'm asked to repeat it again. So I'll say that again. This is the lowest first quarter deficit in more than 10 years. A new day has dawned in our Bahamas. We have been able to achieve this by holding fast to our commitment to fiscal prudence and implementing sound policies to stimulate the economy and generate revenue. We implemented the economic plan, which was the bedrock of the decisive mandate upon which we were elected. The Bahamian tourism sector continued to rebound, with first quarter domestic economic activity rising to pre-COVID, pre-Hurricane Dorian levels. Year on year, the number of total stopover visitors remained strong as the COVID-19 emergency orders were lifted and COVID-19 protocols eased. Many developments in the Family Islands were also continued. The House will recall that before September 2021, there was no end in sight as to when normal constitutional government would return. Businesses and households were unable to plan with certainty as the country was subject to the capricious rule of one man. This had a strongly dampening effect on the economy. The fiscal position was dire. All signs pointed to the fact that they were preparing to announce punishing tax rises, potentially having to call in the IMF to rescue the economy. Had we maintained the course to tax and cut, the economy would have been in disarray. Or if I can just borrow the words of the member for Kalani, who previously described the administration's performance, the economy would have been in a wheelchair. Madam Speaker, despite the continued impacts of the global cost of living crisis, tightening financial conditions in most regions, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lightning COVID-19 pandemic, all dampening.
Honorable member, this is a communication. Yes. Honorable member, let's remember that there be no disturbances during the communication. We'll speak thereafter.
If a communication is
No.
controversial, we are entitled. You could be the guardian of the rule if you like. But the Prime Minister
And honorable member, and we will and I will allow you to rise to honorable member. Honorable member, we have guests in this place, and the people are watching, and you're being very disrespectful to me. I'm speaking to you, and I'm asking you to stop and desist, because we have rules that govern this place, and I'm saying to you that this is a communication, and I will hear you right after the member is completed. Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker.
Minister gonna apologize?
Okay, he said it.
Members,
Madam Speaker, despite
when a member is on their feet and there's a communication, everybody will be quiet.
Madam Speaker, you're dealing with adults.
That is the
Madam
rules.
Speaker.
That is the rules.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
Honorable member, continue.
despite the continued
And I'm not treating you like children. I'm abiding by the rules. Attempting
Despite-
in which way?
We won't tolerate that.
Don't do that.
Saying something that's inappropriate, we reserve the right to challenge it.
And you have the right, and I will give you the right. But we have rules. Go on, honorable member.
Reserve the right, and at the right time,
Just
exercise
attack.
that
Just do
reservation.
what you gotta do.
This is not the right time to
But don't,
exercise
but don't bend the rules. Don't bend the rules.
Despite the continued, Madam Speaker, despite the continued impacts of the global cost of living crisis, tightening financial conditions in most regions, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lingering COVID-19 pandemic, all dampening global projections for 2022. Listen, Madam Speaker, growth in the Bahamas is estimated to remain positive at 3.2%, according to recent IMF publications. They don't have good news. They don't hear good news. They don't hear good news. As mentioned, Madam Speaker,
And good news.
revenue collection for the first quarter of the fiscal year 2022-2023 are estimated at $654.3 million, surpassing prior year's collections by 9.7%. Of this 57.8 revenue, 57.8 million is revenue from value-added tax. Right? A significant portion of it, namely 35.4 million.
Thanks for the effort and import. That was
We have made the point many times, and now the results prove what we've been saying. By reducing the VAT rate from 12% to 10% in January, revenues collected increased because people had more money in their pockets to spend. And each time they spend, VAT revenue improves. We would have thought that the simple logic of how VAT works had already been demonstrated back in 2018, when the previous administration imposed a sudden hike of 60% increase in the VAT rate. This put an immediate brake on economic growth, and VAT revenues increased only marginally. Madam Speaker, the contractions in recurrent and capital expenditures are, as mentioned, the result of prudent fiscal management by the government. While the historically low deficit we have achieved is great cause for celebration, I say to the Bahamian people, as I have already said to members of my cabinet, we are not yet out of the woods. We have to remain prudent and disciplined. While the economy is now heading in the right direction, we must not lower our guard. World events remain unstable, and we have to remain vigilant in case there are other unforeseen future shocks to the global economy. Madam Speaker, I wish to draw attention to one area of expenditure which excites a lot of commentary, and that is the area of travel. I accept that emotions run high for those who engage in the commentary as they see our administration move the Bahamas to a stronger position of influence in the world. I understand the feelings of regret that their voices and views were not canvassed by international bodies in the way our presence is sought. But I do hope that they understand in turn that when we travel, we do so for the good of the Bahamas and the betterment of the Bahamian people. They should also appreciate that a significant portion of the travel spent includes the cost of technical officers who travel for training, capacity building, and development. Expenditure includes also the cost of travel to family islands for public servants to ensure equal access to government services around our archipelago. The first quarter expenditure on travel is around 28% of the travel budget, marginally above the 25% level of the amount budgeted for the year. This is not remarkable. Some quarters, it will be a little higher, others a little lower. But by year's end, it should be within budget. In my budget communication earlier in the year, I highlighted the difference between money spent on investment and money which is expenditure. Fundamentally and ultimately, the test is whether we can show a return on that investment. Permit me to demonstrate what travel has yielded in the past week. In September, I was invited by the New York Times newspaper to participate in a panel discussion in New York whilst I attended the UN General Assembly. The other two participants, now listen, Madam Speaker, the other two participants were the head, not the juniors, no vice, the head of the IMF. The other participant was the head of the World Bank. That conversation sparked widespread global discussion and is credited with a shift in the position of the World Bank. Whilst on that panel, the World Bank head was a climate denier. After that, and after persons around the world heard that, debate going on between myself, the managing director of the IMF, and the president of the World Bank. He was called upon. The whole world heard it. And the World Bank now has shifted their position. Right? That's because I was pressing it to do so. I was able to demonstrate to them what the truth is with climate change.
That's powerful.
Right? Now, I don't talk about no corruption, man. I talk about positive things to build this country and to build all of us. Right? Now, that panel discussion, which went viral around the world, right, was followed by a face-to-face meeting in Egypt. On the day I arrived, I met the invitation from the head of the IMF for us to meet, to further the discussions that we had in New York. Right? They reached out to me. And I understand from the Egyptian protocol team that they all were amazed and impressed that the other countries who met with the IMF had to attend their premises. They came to me, came to the Bahamas. Right? In this instance, man, it ain't about me, it's about the Bahamas, man. I want you to know that. Tell him that. As you may have seen previously reported, the conversation that we had and that we ended up with led to a groundbreaking agreement in principle for the IMF to partner with the Bahamas to develop our blue carbon market sector and to explore swapping debt for carbon credits. And you would have heard her comments following our meetings. This has never happened before. And the Bahamas is set to be in the forefront of this innovation. And in fact, they have now come to recognize and is calling it a new asset class. I couldn't get that done. See, this is the difference between our approach and what went before. We didn't go to the IMF begging for a loan. They came to us, to discuss a partnership. You don't get this kind of agreement by sitting on a Zoom call. You don't get this kind of agreement by just sitting at home with your fingers crossed. You need to build a relationship. You need to be able to look each other in the eye and know that you can work together and achieve great things. You need to build trust and credibility and understanding, something that was previously lacking. Last week's travel also yielded a memorandum of understanding with the African Export-Import Bank, which was signed this morning. That's how quickly we move. Signed this morning. Again, these opportunities do not arise from sitting at home, hoping that some kind of magic will happen. You have to get up, get out, and work the hardest you possibly can in the best interest of the Bahamian people. That is what we are doing. And that is what we will continue to do. And I make no apology for it. And Speaker, a few minutes ago, I speak of the need to continue to be disciplined and prudent in the management of public finances. In relation to travel for public officials, we have recently learned of 2 instances where travel was conducted for political purposes rather than official business. Although there has been the long-standing practice across several administrations of reimbursing such expenditure, I've instructed a tightening of this practice so as to avoid even the appearance of any impropriety. In the 2 cases I've mentioned, the sums of money involved were very small, but it's the principle itself which I think that is important to uphold. And Speaker, we will continue to hold ourselves to be transparent and accountable and will hold others in public life to the same standard. This report into the fiscal performance for the first quarter of the budget year 2022-23 is part of that commitment. And this report will be remembered as a significant period, an historic time when the quarterly deficit was reduced to lowest it had been for the last 10 years. I'm grateful to the Bahamian people for their partnership in this effort, and I congratulate the officials in the Ministry of Finance and throughout the public service who continue to contribute to the prudent fiscal management of the public finances. Madam Speaker, if I could lay.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
Lay the communication and the report on the table. The report is accompanied by the press release that was
Order that the documents still lie on the table. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The intervention I sought to make earlier, Madam Speaker, was meant as no disrespect to you, Madam Speaker. Let me say that for the time I've served in the House, the convention has always been that ministers' communication are non-controversial matters. And wherever any minister would have violated that, members opposite promptly check them on it, Madam Speaker. So again, Madam Speaker, no disrespect intended to you. I was concerned, Madam Speaker, by the opening statement that we will only focus on the mental health bill, Madam Speaker, when we are meeting to discuss the mental health bill, which is extremely important at a time where there are a number of very critical issues affecting us. And therefore, Madam Speaker, initially, the initial statement by the Speaker, again, caused us pause because we know that while we will address that issue, there are other pressing matters we intend to weave into that conversation, given all the issues that we are facing as a people, Madam Speaker. So when I heard the communication that had, to me, offensive language, Madam Speaker, and controversial content, I rose on that occasion. But again, Madam Speaker, I believe we all have developed a wonderful relationship and no disrespect intended. Madam Speaker, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey in San Salvador talked about begging for loans. Again, in the government communication, I find that rather offensive, given the fact the member for Cat Island, Rumkey in San Salvador made the point that this government's engagement with IMF, contrasted with the administration that I was a part of, was not begging for loans. No, the statement, you said you don't go. This wasn't about begging for loans. May I complete the statement, please? The truth is, Madam Speaker, others have criticized this administration of going to multiple international meetings begging, which we have defended, because we believe we are dealt with unfairly by international agencies and by other countries because of our per capita income. And so, again, we don't expect, having stood in defense of the Prime Minister when he goes globally and make the point that...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Challenge.
Speaker,
seeking some guidance on what basis is the honorable member of Marco City engaging this honorable house? Because a communication is not subject to a debate. And certainly, I don't see any provision here for rebuttal on a communication. No, but the speaker, I'm talking to the speaker.
Yes,
I'm on a
yes.
point of order.
He's
The
on his
speaker.
feet, honorable member.
I'm
Honorable member,
recognized
honorable member.
by
We have one
the
member on the
speaker.
feet.
Madam Speaker, there is no provision in the rules, and I appreciate Madam Speaker's tolerance, but certainly this stretches not only the rules, but also the tolerance, because there is an agenda
Yes.
agreed between the government and the official opposition. And clearly, the rules doesn't contemplate every communication is to be debated about some expression. Please, where in these rules?
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This administration, Madam Speaker, has a number of members who I believe are firmly committed to advancing the cause of the disabled community. I thought it was most unfortunate that the member for Cat Island in the communication adopted language that the economy of the Bahamas was not my leader. He adopted language from the former prime minister. According to his statement, that the economy, you should learn to submit to yours. That the economy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas was left in a wheelchair. A most unfortunate reference, and I'm certain the member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador would like to contextualize that, because again, it is again characterizing an important segment of our community, which I'm sure he did not intend. I agree with you. He had no intention to offend in that regard. But Madam Speaker, the communication sought to justify, Madam Speaker, travel. So it's not Madam Speaker, to your point earlier, Madam Speaker, this is not a debate, yet the member spent time trying to justify the travel.
Honorable members.
Justifying travel. So, Madam Speaker, we have never taken issue. We have never taken issue. I don't mean to be to you. So, Madam Speaker, we have never taken issue with the Prime Minister's travel on government business. We have never taken issue with his travel on government business. We have taken issue with the size of delegations, whether or not a prime minister needs to be in a meeting where ministers or ambassadors are located, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, the communication had offensive language, and in our view, was a debate.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
Madam Speaker, please. We must not allow this trend to continue. Because, Madam Speaker, communications are not to be rebutted. No. The member made a communication. If you wish to during your presentation, you can. If the member wishes to, he can refer to it when he's debating today.
And that is true.
But, Madam Speaker, communications, and now the House has been disrupted into what amounts to a debate. We're not there yet, Madam Speaker. So please let us continue our communications so that we can stick to the agenda.
Honorable members. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpkins, and Salvador.
Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City, raised the issue of the characterization of the economy being in a wheelchair. I quoted the member for Kalani.
And Marcus said
I
he had
quote
no
her.
problem with it when he said it.
And all I'm saying, Madam Speaker,
Sit right there.
I understand the member. He don't have to use what I'm doing or saying to say something to attack Kalani.
Yeah, you're right.
See, he's attacking Kalani. I quote Kalani. He said I shouldn't say what Kalani say because these are the man attack him, man. If you I don't bring me into your party business, your internal problems, man. I quoted your leader or your former leader. Right? You sat with him. Heard him talk about wheelchair. Never said anything about it. Because I quote him, don't backdoor him, man. Go to him, face him. Face him and tell him what you want to say to him. I know you use me. All right?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table. Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Speaker, there seems to be great confusion in this House, and I'm not sure why it's lasted so long. But a communication is identified as a statement by ministers in Rule 44 of the Rules of Procedure. A minister may make a statement when statements and communications by ministers are called in the order of business or on private notice to the Speaker at any other time during a sitting. That is identifying the communication, the member statement. Now, when we look to the manner and content of speeches, which covers communications, Madam Speaker, it's not solely to the conduct of members of this House when they are participating in debate, but it is when they are making any type of speech in the House of Assembly, Madam Speaker. And you'll find that there are rules against offensive language at Section 3316 and Section 3317. Section 3316 deals with offensive language, Madam Speaker. Section 3317 deals with imputations. It does not matter, Madam Speaker, that we are not in debate for us to be governed by a code of conduct that is honorable in this great House. And, Madam Speaker, we also have another rule that is a rule that applies anytime a member is speaking, Madam Speaker, and that is a point of order under Section 38. So whether it be a contribution from a member as their debate contribution or a communication, they should not provide imputations or cast aspersions. They should not say, Madam Speaker, in breach of Section 3316, any offensive language. That's a fact, Madam Speaker. I didn't draft this original book, but I know how to interpret it, Madam Speaker. On that, Madam Speaker, I rest my case, and I'd like to give recognition to my old hero, Algernon Allen, the marathon man. He may not be here to see me, Madam Speaker, but he'll see me.
Honorable Member. Thank you, Honorable Member.
So, Madam Speaker, when we rise on a point of order during a communication, it is because we're doing so in accordance with the rules. Yes, it is. You saying you can rise in a communication and cast imputations, use offensive language, and we can't get up and correct you on a point of order? You're mistaken.
Honorable Member, now I've listened to everybody, right? I've listened to everybody. But let me take you to page 10. Duties of the Speaker. 7A. The Speaker is the principal officer of the House of Assembly, and I got my glasses now, I can see good. The spokesperson, representative, and the chairman of the House. Does anybody pay attention to that rule? I want everybody to understand that. So everybody got all the rules in place. But let me tell you something. I know the rules. But I want you to understand page 10. Line 7A. And that gives me the authority to sit in this green chair y'all gave me and to govern all of you when you decide to act out. All. So understand 7A. So if I say we could do it like this, that's my authority in this place. Everybody like to tell me what to do and how to do it. And then when I say something, the first thing everybody jump up and like to say, I treating you like children. Well, how do y'all treat the speaker? How do y'all treat the speaker? No respect. No decorum. I ain't tolerating that from nobody today. And I said that we're gonna do it this way, and that's and I'm not doing, and I don't make these rules up as I go. I understand the rules, and we have mayor's laws that also govern. So when you read this book, go read mayor's. Make sure you understand the rules that govern this honorable assembly. This is the people's house, and this is not a charade. It's no clown show. We don't make and break the new rules and interpret it as we please. So understand 7A, page 10. I just give you the page so you don't miss, okay? So moving forward today and every other day, remember who's the principal officer in this place. You like to get up and tell me, Madam Speaker, I ain't sitting down. Madam Speaker, I ain't doing this. Well, if you don't do as I say, I'm being kind, Ms. Pinder. I'm being kind. You can find your way out that door, down the green rug and outside on the streets. Law and order. Now let's get back to the people's business. That's what we came here to do. And further communications. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Can I use this? Yeah, please, if I can.
Declare my show.
Yeah, it might be, yeah, unfortunately. I apologize that this is not fully written, but a number of inquiries have come to me over the last 24 hours about a vote by the Bahamas government at the United Nations on the draft resolution for the furtherance of remedy and reparation for aggression against Ukraine. Unfortunately, due to an error, the vote of the Bahamas was recorded as no when it should have been abstain. We have a photograph of the board reflecting abstain, but when the vote closed, the vote recorded as no. It should have been abstain. We have taken the steps to seek to reflect properly what the record is, but we've been advised that in the system of the United Nations, it is not possible to change what is the recorded vote. And the procedure is that you enter a statement which corrects the record, which we have done. I've been asked, therefore, to read into the record because the Bahamas government is representing, has the chair of the CARICOM caucus at the United Nations, and this was the statement which was delivered by the Bahamas yesterday on behalf of the 14 countries. And so with your indulgence, Madam Speaker, the statement said as follows: I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 14 member states of CARICOM in explanation of the vote on the draft resolution. CARICOM strongly condemns the unilateral military incursion into Ukraine by the Russian Federation. We maintain the view that the military action by Russia in Ukraine is a flagrant violation of the principles enshrined in the UN Charter, both in word and in spirit. It undermines the core principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states, and the obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force in international relations. CARICOM considers these principles non-negotiable obligations to which all of us as member states of the United Nations have freely consented to be bound. CARICOM subscribes to the principle that for every wrong there is a remedy. There's a fundamental principle of law and equity, and we believe it to be an equally fundamental principle of international law. Indeed, whenever there are wrongs committed, the victim should be entitled to appropriate remedy, including compensation for injury, loss, and damage caused by that wrong. It is a fact that the nation of Ukraine has experienced injury, suffering, and death of many of its people, both military and civilian, as well as damage to critical infrastructure. The world has seen images of the destruction of homes, schools, hospitals, and other institutions and buildings, causing mass displacement of individuals, businesses, families, and communities. We understand that the cost of repairing this damage will be extensive, and that consistent with principles of law and equity, the burden of such compensation should be imposed upon the perpetrator. CARICOM gives due recognition to the global community that views correctly the United Nations as vital to resolving matters of international consequence, including to promote peaceful coexistence in cases where resolution proves elusive. At the same time, however, while CARICOM supports in principle Ukraine's legitimate claim to reparations for the wrongs committed against it by Russia, we believe that such a process must be pursued through an appropriate mechanism. What is being proposed in this resolution contemplates that the General Assembly should endorse a process over which it will have no control, no oversight, indeed no role to play whatsoever. The resolution as drafted asks member states, having thus given their approval, to then trust that the process will be conducted fairly and objectively, with integrity, transparency, and in accordance with the relevant principles of international law. CARICOM notes in operating paragraph 3 of the text the need for the establishment in cooperation with Ukraine of an international mechanism for reparation, damage, loss, or injury arising from the internationally wrongful acts of the Russian Federation in or against Ukraine. We also note the recommendations in operating paragraph 4 for the creation by member states in cooperation with Ukraine of an international register of damage to serve as a record of evidence and claims, information on damage, loss, or injury to all natural and legal persons concerned. In CARICOM's analysis of this call to action by the General Assembly, we offer the following observations on certain aspects of the draft. 1, the resolution does not provide any guiding principles on how the future mechanism would operate or how the register of damage is to be created or managed. In addition, member states are being asked to act on these initiatives in the context of an ongoing war with no real ability to predict any future developments or outcomes. 2, noting that while there are ongoing judicial processes addressing the situation in Ukraine, there is as yet no established jurisdictional basis for the proposed mechanism, nor the register of damage. Neither are pursuant to Security Council resolution, nor an order of the International Court of Justice. Furthermore, it is not within the power of the General Assembly under the UN Charter to create these initiatives. For these reasons, member states of CARICOM will abstain in their vote on this resolution. Nevertheless, CARICOM recognizes that the Russian Federation must bear the legal consequences of all its wrongful acts for any violations of international law in or against Ukraine, or for any violations of international humanitarian law. Indeed, CARICOM reiterates its strong support for the principle that member states have a legitimate right to claim reparations and compensation for injury, loss, and damage caused by the wrongful actions of other member states. This principle is to be applied in the present case as well as other similar cases worldwide. We have sought to make this broader point with regard to a range of issues before the international community, including climate change and indeed reparations in connection with the transatlantic slave trade and genocide. Mass atrocity crimes and gross violations of international law demand scrutiny and justice without exception for whenever in time they occurred, wherever in the world they occurred, and by whomever they were perpetrated. There will always exist a moral and/or legal obligation to correct injustice, including the legacy of past injustice. In closing, CARICOM reaffirms its strong opposition to any and all actions which instigate the disruption of a peaceful multilateral order. We therefore reiterate the call for an end to hostilities, the immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of Russian military forces from the territory of Ukraine, and the return to dialogue and diplomacy in good faith to resolve differences in a peaceful and constructive manner. That concludes the CARICOM statement, which we support. The vote was in error, recorded as no, was in error, should have been abstain. We have put in the necessary papers to seek to amend the record, and we hope that this, for all of our partners in the international community, they now understand that this reflects our true position. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Further statement and communication by minute. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
I wish to make a brief statement on Tropical Storm Nicole. Hurricane, Tropical Storm. Since we are in this mood of not arguing, say hurricane. Madam Speaker, I wish to begin by thanking Almighty God for sparing our country the worst of Tropical Storm Hurricane Nicole. While we suffered some damages, those damages can be described as minimal and primarily along the coastlines of our islands that were affected. More importantly, Madam Speaker, there was no loss of life. Madam Speaker, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank those various agencies, government departments, and staff who worked tirelessly during that period. In particular, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, headed by Captain Commander Stephen Russell, the Disaster Reconstruction Authority, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Department of Meteorology, the Ministry of Works, Public Health, the Department of Social Services, Civil Aviation, Tourism, BPL, BTC, and Alive, as well as other public and private partners for their overwhelming support in preparing for and responding to Hurricane Nicole. Madam Speaker, I'd also like to thank my parliamentary colleagues, in particular Minister Wilschcombe from Social Services, Minister Ginger Moxie from Grand Bahama. I'd also thank Minister Munro from Ministry of National Security, Dr. Michael Davil from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and also those MPs on both sides of those areas affected, in particular the two MPs from Abaco, my colleagues from North and South Abaco, and Grand Bahama, all five of them. Minister Moxie again, Minister Wilschcombe, Member of Parliament for Marco City, Central Grand Bahama, and East End Grand Bahama, who I spoke to personally. Also, St. Barnabas and St. Anne's, who accompanied us after the all clear on our assessment that was mainly Abaco. Even though we went into Grand Bahama, we did not actually view a lot of those sites. As I said, as I spoke in Grand Bahama as Minister with responsibility for that, I plan to go to Grand Bahama, if not sometime this weekend, next week, to take a personal look at those areas that were affected. Madam Speaker, I also would like to say again, I forgot the Deputy Prime Minister, who played a major role also as acting Prime Minister at the time for his support, very detailed, and was there for all of our press briefings, checked in at least an hour at a time. I see Marco City jiving now. Don't bring me in that. Because and so, Madam Speaker, when we have these adverse conditions, it's good when the country could come together, especially politicians. I mean, notwithstanding how we may carry on in here, for the most part, when faced with adversity, we come together as one people in tackling a common goal. Madam Speaker, forecasters said Tropical Storm Nicole was a system with abnormal characteristics, including the broad area where it was expected to have had an impact. A senior hurricane specialist with the National Hurricane Center said Nicole was really unusual. It was not your classic structure you get with a hurricane. And that had a lot to do with Nicole being a late season storm. The storm, according to this individual, had two distinct sections. It had a set of core winds that extended only about 50 to 60 miles from the center. This central area most resembled a typical hurricane. The other section was the extensive wind field surrounding the central area, which behaved much more like a subtropical cold core storm system with a broad wind field. In this case, the tropical storm force winds stretched well over 400 miles from the center. The arrival of the full moon on Tuesday, the 8th of November, brought some of the highest tides of the year, the king tides. Coastal flooding was observed in multiple locations from the combined influences of the king tides and onshore flow driven by unusually strong high-pressure system to the north of Nicole. Madam Speaker, the government monitored Tropical Storm Nicole very closely. Repeated appeals were issued to those residents in low-lying areas and unsafe accommodations to seek safer grounds, including NEBA-approved shelters. Madam Speaker, residents heeded the call to seek safe accommodation, safer. In Grand Bahama, there were 11 shelters that were activated. There were 118 people in those shelters. In Abaco, 15 shelters were activated. There were a total of 841 individuals there. This count includes persons at two unofficial shelters, namely the New Haitian Mission Baptist Church and the New Haitian Baptist Church. It's two different churches. Bimini, there were two shelters that were activated, and one person reported to that shelter. The total of 985 persons who registered at shelters in Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Bimini. On Thursday, November 10th, the acting Prime Minister, the Honorable I. Chester Cooper, and the Member of Parliament for Exuma and Ragged Island, led a delegation of cabinet ministers, members of the official opposition, senior government officials, NEMO officials, disaster reconstruction managers from New Providence and Abaco and Grand Bahama in the aftermath of Tropical Storm Nicole. The delegation was accompanied by initial assessment damage teams to conduct an immediate assessment of the affected areas. The presence of the full team of government officials in Abaco was an indication of the government's commitment to and support of all citizens of the Bahamas or residents who may have been placed in vulnerable positions. Madam Speaker, the timeline of operations. A tropical storm watch was issued for subtropical storm Nicole by the Department of Meteorology on Sunday, November 6th at 5 a.m. At the time, the center of subtropical storm Nicole was located about 526 miles east-southeast of Hopetown, Abaco, 592 miles east-southeast of East End, Grand Bahama, 478 miles east of Governor's Harbor, Eleuthera, and about 550 miles east of New Providence. Subtropical storm Nicole was moving toward the north-northwest at near 14 miles per hour. Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, we have a debate. I would just make the salient points because I know we have to get on to other stuff. NEMA and the emergency support function led facilitated flow of information, provided communication to the public, and identified and developed operational plans to meet the needs of those affected. The Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, was contacted and notified of the Bahamas state of preparedness and the need for support in the event of impact. We provided our information for residents of the Bahamas in English but also in Creole to get the word out for individuals of those communities. Madam Speaker, the all clear was issued by the Department of Meteorology for the entire Northeast Bahamas, where hurricane and tropical storm warnings were still in effect for Grand Bahama, Abaco, the Berry Islands, and Bimini. Initial assessment were conducted on Thursday, the 10th of November, for the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama, once the hurricane and tropical watches were discontinued. And NEMA coordinated the response period with cabinet ministers, senior government officials, and representative of the following ESFs: Public Works and Utilities, Information Management, Mass Care and Shelter Services, Health and Medical Services, Urban Marine Search and Rescue. Madam Speaker, these were the summary of the impacted islands. In Grand Bahama, due on Tuesday, the 8th of November, as of 9 a.m., the Emergency Operations Center was activated. Due to possible flooding concern, a total of 36 people, residents, were evacuated from Proceedings and transported to Maurice Moore Primary School shelter. There were a total of 9 active shelters. That was read all early. Again, Madam Speaker, with regards to the impact, flooding in areas across Grand Bahama and also in Abaco, there were some damages, but that was minimal. Madam Speaker, at this point, as we are nearing the end of the hurricane season, I would have made some promises, in particular to the local council members in Grand Bahama, 8 Mile Rock in particular. Minister Wilson would know, to Jimmy Smith, who chastised me about those wells not being cleaned out in 8 Mile Rock. I think we may have dodged a bullet. And during the off-hurricane season, I would like to tell Mr. Smith that we plan to have those addressed through the various agencies, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would end by saying that now that we have not out of the woods yet, the hurricane season don't end until November the 30th. But as an agency, we are about to lay legislation that will call for the amalgamation. And moving forward, we want to have an agency that will be much more agile and be a 12-month agency that this time next year, Madam Speaker, hopefully we will have an agency that will be moving and not just pulling agencies together, but have individuals that are 24/7 to deal with these matters. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document to lie on the table. Thank you, Honorable Members. Further statement and communication by ministers? Thank you, Honorable Member. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Parliament.
Okay. Madam Speaker, with consent of the House, I would like to withdraw Bill number 56, the Disaster Risk Management Bill, and replace it with a bill of the same name and long title. Madam Speaker, I will read now the long title for the record. a bill for an act to provide for a more effective and comprehensive disaster risk management policy and framework through the establishment of the Disaster Risk Management Authority and for connected matters.
Thank you. Order. Okay. Honorable member, do you give some consent?
Yep, mention that. Yes, Madam Speaker, we do.
Okay, thank you, honorable member. Order that the document be brought up. Order the document do lie on the table. Thank you. For the first readings? Thank you, honorable member. Second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise with profound gratitude today to move the second reading and committal of the mental health bill. A bill for an act to repeal the Mental Health Act and to make provisions for the promotion, protection, and enforcement of the rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, the care and treatment of such persons, the establishment of a mental health services board, the establishment of a mental health review tribunal, and for connected purposes. Madam Speaker, this is a landmark moment for many Bahamians whose lives are impacted by mental health illness, as well as the mental health professionals and advocates who have called for reforms for many years. The bill first tabled in July of this year want all to know that we have consulted and refined this draft to ensure that we are bringing the strongest possible bill to the floor today. On behalf of the many Bahamians whose lives will be impacted, we wanted to ensure that we got it right. I believe that we are delivering a bill that effectively modernizes the laws surrounding mental health, respects the rights of those facing mental health challenges, and puts in place a framework to expand the resources available to help those who need it. Madam Speaker, in our blueprint for change, we committed to addressing mental health issues in the Bahamas as a policy priority. This is part of our vision to promote the overall health and well-being of the Bahamian people. This is yet another instance where the blueprint for change stands out as a real, substantive plan for national development. As we advance our national agenda, our number one priority, Madam Speaker, is to support and empower the Bahamian people. To that end, we have reopened businesses and lowered the unemployment rate. We have maintained high levels of social support and prioritized the expansion of affordable housing. We have increased the minimum wage and are working towards delivering across-the-board pay increases for civil servants at every level of the pay scale. We are addressing learning loss in our schools and creating paid training opportunities for entry-level employment in the private and public sectors. We are introducing a catastrophic healthcare fund for the critically ill, and we have lowered customs duties to limit the effects of global hyperinflation on Bahamian families. This is not an exhaustive list, Madam Speaker, but I believe the trend is apparent. Every step of the way, we have prioritized people and providing support through these difficult times. Not everyone understands how powerful it can be for people to have a few $1,000s extra each year, or how important it is for those who are struggling to have a government fighting for them to lower prices. But we understand, we really do. And for the people who are positively impacted by our policies, they know, Madam Speaker, as they say, he who feels it knows it. And now, Madam Speaker, we are taking important steps to begin addressing the mental health needs of our population. Madam Speaker, as we debate the bill before us today, I would hope that everyone on both sides of the aisle can see the value of what we are doing. The Mental Health Bill 2022 repeals and replaces the Mental Health Act of 1969. 1969. That is how long it has been since we have enacted such a comprehensive reform to the existing mental health legislation. What we see before us represents hard work by policymakers and experts working together to get this done. My administration has treated the passing of this legislation as a matter of urgency because we know the difficulties people are facing throughout the nation. Mental illness, mental disorders, anxiety, and depression are not necessarily topics we talk about every day in the Bahamas. Yet, no family goes untouched by these issues. Many Bahamians have struggled under the weight of mental illness for years, often lacking access to counseling, medication, and treatment options due to the lack of finances, lack of access to expertise, or simply a lack of awareness of where to turn to. We need only look at the tragic suicides in recent memory to get an indication of the silent battles being fought all over the country. And the Bahamas is not alone in this. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 4 people are living with mental illness, and that number is growing each year. Mental health has become a major focus of public health efforts around the world, and the Bahamas is no exception. The bill we are debating today provides a modern, best practice aligned framework, one which will usher us into a new era for mental health in the Bahamas. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities includes long-term mental illnesses as a fully recognized disability. Just as we recognize and advocate for physically disabled communities, it is imperative that we preserve the rights of those living with mental illness, ensuring that they are treated with dignity and respect. In that regard, we admittedly have a long way to go, but today we have taken a very important step. The Mental Health Bill 2022 is rightly viewed as a human rights bill. Its focus is to promote community treatment options and to facilitate voluntary admission to mental health facilities. In this bill, we also see provisions made to allow appointed representatives to assist those living with severe mental illnesses in making decisions about their treatment, as well as their personal and financial matters. The bill before us also allows for the establishment of a Mental Health Services Board and a Mental Health Review Tribunal. The objectives of this bill include preserving the human rights of those diagnosed with mental illnesses, ensuring they are aware of their rights and are protected from discrimination, ensuring that appropriate levels of mental health care and treatment options are available in our communities, empowering persons with mental illness to make decisions about their care and treatment while providing safeguards to protect them and ensure they are treated fairly and humanely, and establishing standards for mental health services, ensuring that there are benchmarks related to quality, safety, and appropriateness of treatments and facilities. This is where having effective teams working through the Mental Health Services Board and Mental Health Review Tribunal to establish and enforce standards will be critical. The duties of the Mental Health Services Board will include establishing general standards for mental health care and treatment, promoting best practices, setting standards for accreditation, inspecting mental health facilities, and advising and assisting the Minister of Health on matters relating to mental health in the Bahamas. The board will be comprised of the Chief Medical Officer, a registered psychologist, a registered psychiatrist, or medical professional with mental health training, the Director or Deputy Director of Social Services, the Chairperson of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, the Chief Nursing Officer, a registered occupational therapist, a person who has accessed mental health services, a family member, next of kin, or caregiver of someone with mental illness, and 2 representatives from civil society with at least 10 years of experience within the mental health field. As you can see, this board will include the necessary expertise, will strike a balance between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and will ensure that diverse perspectives are at the table when decisions are being made and standards are being developed. Madam Speaker, the Mental Health Review Tribunal will hear and review mental health matters. This includes decisions related to making and revoking care and treatment orders, hearing appeals, and hearing complaints regarding violations of rights, among other responsibilities. Like the Mental Health Services Board, the tribunal will include a diverse range of experts and professionals, as well as those with experience related to mental health. The members will include a psychiatrist, a mental health professional with 10 years experience, counsel and attorney at law, a person who has experience in social services, as well as those who are advocates for those with mental health illnesses. Madam Speaker, again in our Blueprint for Change, we spoke of our plan to tackle threats to the well-being of young people, including issues of mental health. We remain committed to that objective. As a grandfather, with a great deal of affection for all our Bahamian children, it is of great importance to me that this legislation protects and supports our youngest citizens. This bill will ensure that minors will have a clear idea of who represents their interests and establishes standards for those who seek to act in the best interest of our darlings. I tried to borrow that from a former member of Parliament who was in the audience today. We are building a better Bahamas for everyone. That means people from every walk of life, and therefore must include those with severe mental illness. We are all aware that many Bahamians who are homeless are sufferers of severe mental illness. I'm reminded of a very dark time in our recent history. During the pandemic, homeless Bahamians, including the likely mentally ill, were arrested and imprisoned for curfew violations. I don't intend to get into a debate about the curfew laws, but I'll say that I believe we can all recognize the lack of compassion behind that policy. Under the Mental Health Bill 2022, persons appearing to have mental health illnesses will be taken to the nearest healthcare or mental health facility where they can receive the treatment they need. Imprisoning people or taking them to
The dark ages.
to the police station is a thing of the past. Imprisoning people with mental health illnesses is not a solution. This law specifically addresses offenses against persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, ensuring that they are protected from abuse, mistreatment, and neglect while being cared for in medical and mental health facilities. Individuals found to have committed such offenses will be fined, given up to 2-year prison sentences, or both. Similar penalties will apply to those who improperly or unlawfully detain persons with mental illness. We are taking the protection of the rights of people living with mental illness very seriously. So, Madam Speaker, these pages sticking. This change has been a long time coming. There are many who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes and advocated vigorously to make today a possibility. Much to the frustration of those living with mental illness and the mental health professionals who take care of them, mental illness is one of the most neglected areas of public health. However, things are changing. This bill is a testament to that change. We talk about how resilient we are as a people, and we should take great pride in our strength. But resilience does not mean we never experience shadows or darkness, or that as a population we are immune to the ravages of mental illness. It means we overcome crisis and tragedy through faith, family, community, and yes, through compassionate medical treatment. Too many people have been suffering alone and in silence. We need a more open, more honest, and more compassionate national conversation about mental health. When someone has a heart disease, or a kidney disease, or eye disease, we do not deny them our compassion or attention. People who suffer from afflictions that affect the brain should be treated no differently. I want all Bahamians to know this. Seeking medical attention for a mental health crisis for yourself or for a loved one is a sign of strength, not weakness. Yes. No shame. See, if your sister or mother or uncle broke a leg, if you broke a leg, you will not hesitate to seek medical care. It should be no different for any number of treatable mental illnesses. Across the world, scientists are making important progress in mapping the brain, an extraordinarily complex organ, with the goal of better understanding the cause of mental illness. We hope these efforts will lead to breakthrough treatments, but there are important tools we have now to manage mental illness, and we should not wait to use them, just as we should fight the fear and ignorance that prevent people from responding to a mental health crisis with empathy and care. We still have so much progress to make in this area. The legislation we debate today is an important step forward. I know we are building a foundation that will improve and save many lives. Since Dorian, since the pandemic, we know the anxiety, uncertainty that is exercising the mind of our people. And it's no better time for us, to move the needle, to be able to assist those who are suffering and to attempt to remove any stigma that's associated with mental illness. I want to thank you, Madam Speaker. I look forward to a passionate debate, as I know that this is an issue that is very near and dear to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to second this bill, my capacity as the Acting Minister for Health and Wellness. As always, Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to the people of Freetown who sent me here to represent them in the people's business here. This bill I consider to be, Madam Speaker, a very important step in looking after the welfare of our people. I call it a privilege, Madam Speaker, to do so because this bill actually records the proverbial blood, sweat, and tears of those who have worked so assiduously over the past 10 years to bring this bill to Parliament and have it enacted into law. To be clear, 10 years factually obviously spans 2 administrations. And so this bill has been in the works and been worked on by the persons and necessary professionals for that period. This bill, therefore, should not be a political football and should meet broad bipartisan support. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't state the following. When this Davis-Cooper administration took office in October 2021, one of its first priorities was to help lead this country back to economic stability by enacting legislation and policies that would guide us out of the prolonged emergency orders. One of the key instruments of navigating the course was to address the health and wellness needs of our people while living and functioning in a pandemic that is not fully left us. And we did that. In the Blueprint for Change, we outlined our commitment to upgrading healthcare infrastructure throughout the Bahamas, including the building of new hospitals. And we are doing that. We budgeted for catastrophic healthcare, and we're on the path to having catastrophic healthcare insurance. We have signed a new bargaining agreement with our hardworking nurses and continue to meet and dialogue with all of our health care professionals to ensure that our precious human resources have what is needed to provide the best standard of healthcare delivery across this archipelago. With 1 year under our belt, this Davis-Cooper administration remains focused and committed. Today is yet another example of our dedication to give priority to legislation that speaks to our social reform agenda, which aims to bring dignity to the poor and those with illnesses, both physical and mental, in this country. This bill seeks to protect real people who have been living in the shadows for years, many stripped of their human rights, while family members, friends, and co-workers struggle to help them cope with human indignity that appears to be embedded in our society against those who suffer from mental illness. This bill sets the parameters that commences our 21st century thinking and action plan towards assisting people in our country who find themselves in a state of mental unwellness. This bill is progressive and will not only be a catalyst for mental health and social reform here in the Bahamas, but will also be a leader in this region. Madam Speaker, mental health is defined by the World Health Organization, the WHO, as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community, end quote. Put simply, anything outside of that definition can be considered a state of mental unwellness on a wide spectrum of conditions. As the member for Cat Islands and Salvador and Rumkey has already said, The WHO estimates that mental illness will affect 1 in 4 people in their lifetime, 25%. And it is estimated that 1/3 of the financial resources expended on non-communicable diseases over the next 20 years will be allocated to mental illness, which is a common comorbidity of poverty and other non-communicable diseases such as HIV and other infectious diseases. Madam Speaker, I wish to draw your attention and those members of this honorable House to the link between natural disasters and the pandemic on mental health. One of the geographical realities that we face as a country is that each year we transition through an annual hurricane season spanning some 6 months, and we know it, from June 1st to the 30th of November. Each year, we must prepare for the possibility of being impacted by something that is truly out of our control, and that is Mother Nature. Because long before there was a COVID-19 pandemic and the current effects of climate change, there was a hurricane season. In 2019, the wrath of Hurricane Dorian raised the bar, as some may say. And now we live with the reality that lives, livelihoods, and whole communities on our islands can be significantly impacted in a matter of hours. The fact that this has been a reality for many in our country and has affected the lives of many others has added to the difficulty associated with coping with, recovering from, and planning for the potential of a natural disaster such as a tropical cyclone. No corner of our archipelago has been spared in the past 10 years, but we know that the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama have had more than their fair share over that period. This type of trauma takes a toll on both one's mental and physical state. Adding to this trauma has been the declaration of a COVID-19 virus pandemic and its associated lockdowns, social restrictions, financial and food insecurity, loss of loved ones, unemployment, sorrow, stress, and cognitive crisis. These factors were not only damaging for persons with existing diagnosis, but also to persons with no history or inclination of a diagnosis of mental illness. The truth is, when the full effect of the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ever-present memories of the devastation caused by the past hurricanes, and underlying, never-explored personal traumas are manifested, we expect that there will be an increased number of mental illness diagnoses in our country. Madam Speaker, it is critical then that our healthcare system, legislature, and members of the society are ready and equipped to treat, care for, and support persons suffering from or showing symptoms of mental illness. You know, Madam Speaker, in all sincerity, I believe that if we were to take a poll today in this very honorable House, a place where decisions are made and healthy debates are willingly entered into, we would find that more than 50% of us could point to, in a very short period of time, a time when the stresses of everyday life, the loss of a mother or a father, a child, a spouse, a job, not achieving goals, experiencing the devastation of a hurricane really broke us down and challenged our mental health. 1 in 4, Madam Speaker, according to the WHO, 1 in 4, 25% are adversely affected and succumb. Sorry? See now. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, so I will resist that temptation. We do not know when or how our natural fortitude will be tested. That is why this bill is so important. It puts people at the center of their care and treatment, preserving one's dignity and participation in both their care and ability to contribute to society. Madam Speaker, the reality is that a person's mental health can be challenged at any time and at any age. Too often we've heard accounts in our society that sound something like this, and we've all heard this. She used to be such a lovely person. Then I don't know what happened. She just tripped out. He used to be so reliable. Now I don't know what happened. He is not the same. Or you may hear something like, remember that time went out of nowhere. He or she just lost her mind or his mind. We hear this all of the time. And too often, as the Prime Minister said, we see persons walking the street, showing obvious signs of cognitive disturbance. And in this day and age, we pull out our smartphones and we videotape their antics and we circulate them. And we all know it. We know which traffic lights you have a high possibility of seeing them at. And yet, until we pass this piece of legislation, the help that the Prime Minister set out that will be available is not and will not be available. And so we are seeing increased levels of post-traumatic stress disorder. I would imagine our friends and colleagues from Grand Bahama and Abaco know too well the signs of post-traumatic stress disorder in their communities. Homelessness, hopelessness, mental suffering, and irregular behavior. Madam Speaker, this bill is for individuals who are experiencing mental ill health and their family members that have undertaken to help care for them. What we have discovered that was not previously known back when the existing act was enacted in 1969 is that when people display episodes of mental unwellness, we need to help them immediately, treat them with dignity, get to the root of the trigger, and aim to help them get their mental health level. But through all of these stages, we must preserve their personhood, their dignity, and their participation in life. Madam Speaker, although similar, some tend to use the term mental health and mental illness interchangeably. However, let us remember that they differ in meaning. Mental health is a cognitive and emotional state of well-being, and it affects us all. Mental illness are diagnosable disorders that only some people experience. For example, constant depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. Mental health and mental illness can be affected by the same factors, meaning that if disaster strikes, or poverty persists, or if physical and mobility challenges occur to the body, for example, these can negatively affect somebody who is considered mentally well and temporarily change their state of well-being. And it can also affect a person with mental illness. Madam Speaker, some may question why repeal and replace. To them I say this: the current Mental Health Act has been in existence, as we've all heard, since 1969. For context, I was born in 1968, and it's been a very good 54 years. But I'm not sure I'm fit for younger purposes anymore. And so as I look to the future in our children and grandchildren, we also look to the future in this piece of legislation. It is also problematic, Madam Speaker, because it's not compliant with the Disabilities Act. And so it stood still in 1969. We passed the Disabilities Act, where anyone with a disability, like somebody in a wheelchair, is not to be discriminated against. And so the persons who have mental illness are to be treated the same as those who are physically handicapped. And so this law, the provisions of this bill, will make that a reality. Because it's not 1969 anymore, happily. It is a new day. And we will have a new regime in this new day. This bill also aims to meet the standards of the United Nations Conventions on the Right of Persons with Disabilities and acknowledge the advancement in the understanding and care and treatment of mental illness. Today in this honorable House, as we debate this bill, I trust that it will be properly and expeditiously enacted for the benefit of our people and in the push for optimal wellness for all. Madam Speaker, just some quick facts. The current Mental Health Act is comprised of 9 parts with 44 clauses. This new bill is comprised of 13 parts with 76 clauses. This is not merely an increase in number, it is also an increase in quality, and each part deals specifically with addressing the needs of those with mental illness or those displaying symptoms of mental illness, who are far too frequently neglected or forgotten. The primary focus of this bill, as the Prime Minister has said, is on the rights of the individual and the provision of care, treatment, and protection of decision-making privileges of persons who may or may not have a mental illness in the community. This bill reflects decades of advocacy for increased awareness, education, and the call for the adjusting of attitudes towards mental health. This collaborative work stretches across the political divides and administrations. I'm pleased to say, notwithstanding that at this time, this bill is being brought forward to the forefront to begin to transform how we handle mental health matters in our society. Madam Speaker, you may notice right away with this bill that the interpretation section is more extensive, and rather than launching into compulsory admission to hospital, as the current bill does, this bill begins by charging the minister with the responsibility for ensuring that programs, personnel, and multi-governmental partnerships are in place to promote mental health and mental well-being amongst our people. The substantive Minister of Health and the Ministry of Health and Wellness are committed to getting this done. That is why it is so important to include in this bill Part 11, which relates to the establishment of the Mental Health Care Board, which the member for Cat Islands and Salvador and Rumkey has already spoken to. Part 4 of the bill, Madam Speaker, speaks to the rights of persons with mental illnesses. No longer should persons be cast aside and automatically deemed incapable of having their rights protected because of mental illness. In addition to their constitutional rights, persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness will have the right to access mental health and medical services without discriminations, rights to live in the community, rights to information pertaining to their care and treatment, and communications with others, and more. To ensure that the rights of persons diagnosed with or showing symptoms of mental illness are protected, the bill also addresses the duties and responsibility of mental health service providers, the Department of Corrections, and the courts. I'd like to take a few moments to focus on Part 5 of the bill, which is the care and treatment of mental illnesses. For too long, we've carried the erroneous thought that people who seek psychological help are weak, incapable of functioning, or in some way lesser than others. We now understand that to seek help, to acknowledge that you cannot do it on your own, actually shows a realization of your ability, presence of mind, and grand strength, as the Prime Minister has said. This bill provides a space for persons who are exhibiting signs of mental unwellness to have voluntary admission to a health or mental health facility for assessment. It also allows persons to take a proactive role in their mental health and designate a nominated representative to enact an advance directive to aid in the proper facilitation of care and treatment. As outlined in Part 3, the ability of capable individuals to make informed decisions about their care and treatment is a fundamental right. If for any reason they're not capable, the role of the nominated representative can take effect, someone that person has designated in advance. Adults may appoint and document in writing that choice. The same applies with children. Their parents will be their representatives, and in cases where children have no parents, an order of precedent has been set. A person is not to be treated as unable to make their own decisions unless and until all practical steps have been taken without success. This bill, Madam Speaker, seeks to give the person control over their care and treatment rather than have somebody dictate what should happen. They can choose a representative who they believe will act in their best interest, and they have the ability to adjust their decisions when necessary. Madam Speaker, Part 12 of the bill establishes the composition, jurisdiction, and proceedings of the Mental Health Review Tribunal, which the member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador has already referred to. Madam Speaker, in this bill, the Supreme Court is granted powers to protect persons who lack mental capacity. This is indeed important, and a guardian can be recommended to care for the person, and by extension, the family, or an order of conservatorship can be granted to ensure that the best decisions are made regarding property, finances, and personal decisions. We all know how nasty it can get where money and things are involved. Madam Speaker, one of the biggest monsters, we must say, when it comes to mental health is stigma. The unfair labeling, disregard, and treatment of persons suffering from mental illness has been a thorn in the side of our battle for equality in healthcare, particularly as it relates to mental well-being. Let us all stop and think of how, in our minds, we consider these folks we see on the side of the road, clearly mentally unwell. What do we think of them? This is the stigma that must be done away with. We all suffer with it, and so we must all make an effort to educate ourselves out of it, each and every one of us. This bill seeks to strip away the derogatory labels and discrimination that persons with mental illness can be subjected to and provide them with preservation of their rights. Let me be very clear, and I direct this message to every person residing in the Bahamas, including persons who are employed under the umbrella of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, inclusive of all our institutions and agencies. It is our national responsibility to treat each other with care and dignity in our interactions with each other. In the health industry, whether public or private, there's a prevailing duty to deliver compassionate, quality, and healing care in a health or mental health facility.
Yes.
Anyone who mistreats or neglects persons under his or her care opens himself or herself the penalties as prescribed in this bill. The penalties outlined are either 2 years custodial imprisonment or $1,000 fine, or both. There's also a penalty for anyone who thinks that he or she can help the person escape. And this is a fine of $600 or imprisonment for a year or both. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to mistreating or abusing our fellow brothers and sisters who are suffering or displaying signs of mental illness. Madam Speaker, waiting the span of my lifetime for reform is too long. This bill is timely, relevant, and necessary for safeguarding how we care for and treat people who may or may not have a mental illness in this country. It is the role of the government to ensure that the legal framework is in place to support policies and programs that will advance this country. This bill recognizes and seeks to remedy what our forefathers were not privy to in 1969. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and persons who suffer from mental illness deserve dignity, respect, and support. And I repeat, Madam Speaker, mental health is just as important as physical health. I look forward to the passing of this long overdue legislation. Before I take my seat, Madam Speaker, I wish to advise the Bahamian people that the presentation of this bill is just one part of the work being done by this government to address mental health in our community. When we came to office, we found a number of activities and plans to combat mental health that we had previously started was stagnated. In the near future, Dr. Darville, the substantive minister, will come back to this honorable place to report on the progress of the work of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and how it is going in partnering with mental health professionals locally and in the Bahamian diaspora. During the next several months, we hope to advance work towards the crafting of a national suicide prevention strategy. We plan to enhance the skill and expertise of healthcare providers at the primary care level to recognize undiagnosed mental health issues and to initiate treatment on the spot. This initiative, which was a part of the work started by the former Christy Davis administration and has reaped significant dividends in reducing the need for emergency airlift for episodes of psychosis in the Family Island, will be completed with rollout in Grand Bahama and New Providence. Madam Speaker, the substantive minister would wish to express his sincere gratitude to the cadre of professionals at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, integrated with the institution and agencies that were committed to repealing and replacing this 53-year-old Mental Health Act. We hope and we trust that we will all recognize in this debate the need to urgently and expeditiously pass this piece of legislation. And while we do that, to begin to work on sensitizing ourselves and our communities that persons who are mentally unwell deserve support, deserve sympathy, are owed their dignity and their humanity. Freetown, Madam Speaker, seconds and supports.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Before we move on, I would just like to make one brief comment. Just as I rule that cell phones are to remain quiet amongst my members, I also like to extend that to members of the gallery. I see a lot of you are using your cell phones, especially when the member is on their feet. I don't tolerate the noise. So please keep your cell phones quiet, please, in the gallery. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. Mental Health Bill 2022. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd once again like to give thanks to Almighty God for this opportunity, to the residents of Marco City for bestowing upon me this honor to lend my voice, my efforts daily to your empowerment. Today, Madam Speaker, I join my colleagues in this place to support the Mental Health Bill 2022. Madam Speaker, in light of so many pressing matters that impact our country, I wish to clearly signal my intention to address a number of very important matters that impact our country. As those issues, Madam Speaker, in many ways are triggers to the anxiety, the depression, the pressure that many of our people are under. Madam Speaker, before I begin, let me address the communication that was made by the Prime Minister only so much as to say I was stunned at the brevity and to a large extent the hollowness of the statement relative to FTX. We are facing a substantial risk to our financial services sector. And one would have expected that since the international community eyes are trained on the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that on this occasion, that this Davis-Cooper administration would have thought it necessary to break its silence much earlier and with a far more comprehensive statement, given the gravity of this issue. Madam Speaker, whenever there is a vacuum and a silence or an absence of explanation or putting in context of such a serious situation as a meltdown of a massive company that is registered here in the Bahamas, that vacuum will be filled by others, many of whom are enemies of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And they would seek.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Ramkey, San Salvador.
First of all, the member has to be very careful because you don't understand what has been happening. You don't understand what's been happening. If you listen, no, I can lecture you because you don't understand. Listen, no, this is not about idea. This is a lecture on what the facts are. I'm telling you what the facts are. I'm not lecturing. No. I've done that. If you listen to what I've said, yeah, you know what I've said. You said, right? If you listen to what I've said, right? Because, Madam Speaker, again, he says where there's a void. Again, Mr. Speaker, we are debating the Mental Health Act. We are doing that, right? Mr. Speaker, the FTX, what he has to appreciate is that the exchange that is registered, and I said it in my statement, FTX, the exchange that has been licensed by the Bahamas, is a separate entity than that which which the other jurisdictions are dealing with. We took if you listen to me, we took action locally to ensure that we protect the jurisdiction. See, as I'm saying, facts are unfolding. You don't jump ahead of yourself to make these cheap political shots. Understand what the facts are. They're still unfolding. Understand what the difference between the various entities. I mentioned it. Need go no further. And you have to be careful what you're saying because the matter is still being before the courts. Yes. So I try to be as sanguine as possible so as not to say that I'm influencing the proceedings going on to court. That's why brevity. That's why I just settled the salient facts. And that's why. Require. Right? And that's what responsibility requires on my part.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Speaker, brevity and hollowness of the member of Cat Island's statement, in my view, left a vacuum that permits enemies of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who wish to mischaracterize the regulatory environment in the Bahamas for their benefit. Madam Speaker, I would have thought that the Prime Minister would have done one of several things in addition to what he said. One thing the Prime Minister could have done today is to say to the Bahamian people, we have taken the required steps to do the following. One, through the Minister of Labor, ensure that all Bahamians who work for this institution, that we are in fact making sure their entitlements, their benefits, all matters would be dealt with. Secondly, the Prime Minister could have addressed the issue on whether or not a study has been commissioned that the private sector who have concerns.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fort Charlotte.
Speaker, on a point of order, and the point of order, Madam Speaker, is Rule 30, and I wish to take this Honorable House, Rule 30, Sub-Rule 20. Any reference to a matter awaiting or under adjudication in a court will not be permitted unless the Speaker's discretion, that reference will not interfere in any material way with that court matter. It is a matter that the House can take notice that this matter is before the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. A provisional liquidator had been appointed, and I am advised that an official liquidator has been appointed, or is likely to be appointed, and the matters to which the honorable member has addressed are specifically proposed by the law in the liquidator. In other words, the emoluments, security of staff, of trade creditors, of investors, all of these matters are under the direct supervision and control of the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The liquidator is an officer of the court. And therefore, not only is it against the rules, but it may interfere as if the Parliament is interfering with another branch of government which has direct carriage of this matter. I would, through you, Madam Speaker, that the honorable member from Marco City govern himself accordingly.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable member for Marco City,
Madam Speaker.
I would ask that we now refrain, and all members refrain from those matters now that is presently present before the court. We will have a time in this place when I feel that when we can debate that, but as it now may be, those matters are presently before the court of the Bahamas, and we have to comply by those rules and regulations. So I would ask all members to refrain. And you know, I have made a prior, and this goes back to me just saying that in this place, I don't know what it is, why I can never be respected when I make a ruling, that we will try to stick to script, which is the Mental Health Act. And I know that we want to debate this FDX, but there will be a time when all members will have a say. But as it may be right now, it's before the courts, and I cannot allow members to disrespect the legislative branch of our country. Okay? Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
What was the rule advised by?
I didn't give a rule.
No, from the member for Fort Charlotte, which. The rule, Madam Speaker. Which was the rule? Do you wish to talk all day?
The Speaker's rule.
It doesn't matter what I say.
He said sub rule 30. There's no sub rule 30 on page 28. Well, then ask the gentleman behind not to cloud your response. Yes, but what was the
members?
What was the rule, Madam Speaker? The Speaker's rule. Madam Speaker, I'd like to be aware of this rule. I'm looking in the book. I'm not sure why it's escaping him now.
When the Speaker has ruled, the matter is finished. And the rule says any reference to
What's the number? What's the number? That's all I'm asking.
Under
adjudication.
in a court shall not be permitted unless the Speaker's discretion that reference will not interfere in any material way with the court matter. That is the rule. But the Speaker has ruled. I mean, we going over this again?
South Andros, the Speaker recognized myself. I don't know who you're representing as being disrespectful. No, she recognized me. The gentleman from Fort Charlotte.
Honorable members.
She never recognized him.
Honorable members.
She never recognized him.
Are you satisfied, honorable member? No. Marco City, you may.
Madam Speaker, we were elected to address issues that impact our jurisdiction. And so, Madam Speaker, I close this segment relative to the points I made earlier by simply saying this. It's important that as policymakers, we tell the world that we have done everything possible to make sure that we have a sound regulatory environment. The Bahamas has been one of the leaders internationally. And that isn't only as it relates to the broad regulatory environment, that we intend within the digital asset space to continue to be a leader in the global community. And notwithstanding what has happened, the goal is to ensure that we are a blue chip jurisdiction. That's what I would have expected to hear from a sitting prime minister. And no, it was not said. Let me also say, Madam Speaker, that today, as we address the mental health bill, I wish to commend all of those public servants, the international agencies that would have contributed, including PAHO, the mental health professionals in the Bahamas who played a leading role in helping to shape this legislation over the many years. I wish to recognize the work done by one of our colleagues who is not in this place at this time, but he and his staff who shepherded the legislation and, of course, sent it to the Attorney General's office, and to the credit of this administration, they have now brought it here to Parliament. let me say, Madam Speaker, that this is an important step forward. Madam Speaker, this is the modernization of the Mental Health Act. The reality is, much of the good practices put in place by mental health professionals, those acts are not yet codified in law, and today, this exercise seeks to codify many of those best practices. Madam Speaker, what is also true is that by us debating this bill today, we are drawing awareness to those citizens in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who have been disadvantaged by our insensitivity or sometimes by our indifference as a population. I would note, Madam Speaker, that as policymakers, one of the chief culprits on making mental illness a pejorative are policymakers. It is one of those things in the arsenal of political parties that they tend to use and direct at others. And you can hear from some of the jokes from the seat that we have not gotten the message yet. Madam Speaker, today, I believe that we are taking an important step in addressing a number of issues: awareness, the need for additional resources, for staffing as well as for facilities. And Madam Speaker, my colleagues will talk in greater depth about each aspect of this bill. I wish to, before I transition, make the point that one of the glaring gaps in this bill and in our overall approach to this matter is the absence or the scarcity of resources to do many of the things that are required. One of the speakers earlier, Madam Speaker, made the point that what we ought to do is persons who are homeless, people who are disadvantaged, in other words, being thrown out of their own homes, that they should, in fact, be placed in a safe facility. Madam Speaker, which facility were they referring to? Because the reality is there are so few facilities available in New Providence. Grand Bahama is even more difficult, and most of the family islands actually have no place for persons who are challenged in a way that they are unable to live with their family. So we have a resource problem, Madam Speaker. We also, Madam Speaker, have a very serious challenge in terms of the allocation of the resources that do exist to address this particular issue. Just today, reference is made in one of the dailies to the amount of persons with mental illnesses that are in prison when they should be in another facility. And just recently, 2 families are grieving because they have lost loved ones who had mental challenges and were in the Department of Corrections facility. So, Madam Speaker, we have very live and real issues that we are facing. And one good way to judge the seriousness of policymakers in general is when you have these live issues, how swiftly do you move to remedy it? So again, what steps are being taken now in light of the high level of homelessness that includes many persons who have mental illnesses? What are we doing at Fox Hill, at the corrections facility, in light of the fact that among the population, some 80 persons were mentioned in a recent article as having mental illness? What are we doing now? To hear from this administration concrete steps being taken would give pause, and it would encourage those of us that this is more than rhetoric. And so, Madam Speaker, we support this move to modernize the Mental Health Act. We support creating greater awareness, codifying best practices. We support having open, honest conversations with our population so that people know it is okay to have discussions about these issues, that we in general, men in particular, should not suffer in silence, but should seek help and have conversations that can have an impact on their mental health. Madam Speaker, having said that, I wish now, Madam Speaker, to address a number of matters that, in my view, there is a conjunction. There is a connection in part to what we're talking about. Just recently, my colleagues and I, we traveled to Abaco in order to talk with residents and entrepreneurs who were impacted by Tropical Storm Nicole in Abaco. It was then Hurricane 1, Category 1 in Grand Bahama. Madam Speaker, one of the anxieties, and I mentioned it while pledging our support to work with the government in the aftermath, in fact, in advance and in the aftermath of climatic events, one of the anxieties people have is how can they cope with repairing the homes that they have that are already damaged, but are unable in a timely fashion to receive help in making those repairs. So when a tropical system comes through, those roofs that had not been repaired from previous systems, in other words, the long list of people who were helped, this crew did not yet get help. They are anxious about the fact that they do not have access to resources to repair their roof, to fix compromised doors, windows, etc. And so there is a need, Madam Speaker, for us to move with a sense of urgency in terms of addressing the unmet needs of many of our residents in Abaco and again in Grand Bahama. I know efforts were made, Central and South Abaco, I believe. The tour was fairly extensive there. North Abaco, we pick up the slack for the government. We went to North Abaco and talked to the residents on their behalf. We understand that the Deputy Prime Minister came back, had an opportunity to go into Cooperstown. The Member of Parliament, of course, he went into North Abaco, as is his job. And of course, we had an opportunity to go to Treasure Key as well to meet with residents. We did the same thing. In Grand Bahama, we went to all 5 of the constituencies before we arrived at the press conference. And so we are absolutely committed to working closely with residents and entrepreneurs in all of the islands. Madam Speaker, one of the matters that concern us, as I listen here today, the Prime Minister, the member for Cat Island, Watkins and Salvador spoke about the small amount of funds. Again, and we are talking about resources, Madam Speaker, whether for mental health, whether for remedying those persons negatively impacted by Dorian. He talked about the small amount of funds that was spent by the government on behalf of a private political trip. We wish to remind members opposite that what they did broke the law. We want to know what is the remedy to them having broken the law, and we want to see the figures. Mentioning that it's a small amount does not fly with the Bahamian people. What is the amount? We heard very small amounts, but we know a trip from the Bahamas to Bermuda is an expensive proposition. How much was it, and can we have the figures laid here in the House of Assembly? We will not, the public will not forget the Bermuda Triangle and the decisions made by this government, the arrogance to spend public money on a private political initiative. Madam Speaker, it was a gross error of judgment, but what is also true is that it broke the law. There are no provisions that facilitate that. I challenge the Prime Minister to lay on the table the incidences that he mentioned where this has been done before by other administrations. I presume he's talking about past FNM and past PLP administration. He ought to bring the facts. But even in bringing them, it does not make it legal. Madam Speaker, let me also say that this administration, many times when it has an opportunity to engage in good governance, and we have not, on this side, we have been very responsible in acknowledging wise decisions when they are made by this administration. But this administration can only take compliments. They don't have the capacity to accept criticisms. And for this administration, politics always trumps good governance, always. At the end of the day, when faced with weighing those two, politics trumps good governance. It's not to say you haven't accomplished anything. It's not to say you're not pursuing some noble endeavors that would accrue benefit. Let me give one example. We said previously in here on the 6-legged highway, election. Y'all never stop. Y'all never stop. Y'all never stop.
Hurricane supplies for campaign. I mean, if you want to talk about it, in the north. I can say which north, but you probably.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy, one of the reasons we are having challenges finding some resources is because this government is about that business of pomp and pageantry, cocktail parties before, and then, of course, receptions after almost any event. There are no events that they're prepared to pass by without attaching a fun time to. Madam Speaker, while some other people are suffering. Madam Speaker, we have never taken issue with the Prime Minister doing the people's business internationally. We did the same. We traveled in order to be advocates for the Bahamas, to engage in discussions, etc. What we have taken issue with, Mr. Deputy, is the size of the delegations and whether or not it was appropriate for those persons who were on the trip to be at a meeting. So should the Prime Minister be at meetings where his minister could take care of the issue? Should the minister be at a meeting where the ambassador, and we have a record number of ambassadors, so we have no shortage of people strategically placed in almost every jurisdiction. And that is the issue. Politics trumps governance. The six-legged roundabout is symptomatic, it's emblematic of this, the mentality and arrogance of this administration. So you have the images of members of the Progressive Liberal Party on a boat in the center of a public roundabout. A public roundabout. And so, if I were to come into Parliament with the F&M paraphernalia, it would be inappropriate given what the code is for how we ought to address. Are you telling me this administration has a boat, an image of their leaders, like a banana republic?
Member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Mr. Deputy, the member for Marco City seeks to suggest that the government has put in place or put on a roundabout images of members of parliament. The government has nothing to do with that at all. And if you're asking for it to be removed, then you should do that, but do not place that on the government. There are enthusiastic supporters of the PLP who today still support the direction the country is going. So please.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
This administration is creating the kind of culture. This administration is creating a culture where they believe.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
Not games. When we speak in this place, we speak truth. We have nothing to do with what somebody might have done. If you have a difficulty with it, appeal to the Ministry of Works and have it removed. That's the way you do it. You talking about how people ought to behave. That's what you ought to do. You don't come in the house and trivialize it.
Thank you, honorable member.
I think we got time for nonsense.
Is creating a culture where they believe that they are able to do as they wish with the people's patrimony. That's why they could spend public money to go to Bermuda for a political event. That's why they could take a roundabout that they know they have restricted people from putting signage on, and they put their sign. It is a mentality. It is a condition of the heart. It's arrogance.
Member,
that's what it is.
The chair recognizes.
Go move the boat. Go move it. Go and move it.
Marco City.
Go move it. Go move it.
The member of Parliament for Marco City knows better. The member of Parliament does not wish to accept that we have enthusiastic supporters of the BLB. Nobody has put yours up. That's your business. At the end of the day, if you have a difficulty, appeal it to the Ministry of Works. The Progressive Liberal Party, the members of the government did not direct anyone. That is trivial nonsense.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Yes. The enthusiastic supporters' hopes are dashed when we came in the House and represented that a hotel was sold when it was not. And after multiple delays, the hotel deal is dead. your
Marco
enthusiastic
City,
supporters
the chair
who are
recognizes.
hoping for an airport.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, the member is an actor. And he's clearly putting on a show for somebody. But he's crossing the line, Mr. Deputy. He is representing that somebody said the hotel was sold. He knows better. He knows full well.
Why are you doing that?
He knows that the communication was that there's a due diligence period, there's a negotiation of heads of agreement, and all of that had to be done, Mr. Speaker. He is misrepresenting. He's almost celebrating, Mr. Deputy. I find this quite curious, given that this member represents a constituency on the island of Grand Bahama. He's being most disingenuous. He's being irresponsible as a leader of the opposition, Mr. Deputy. And I ask him to desist because he knows better, or he ought to know better, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Deputy, I have warned this administration over and over again not to oversell and underdeliver. We've said it over and over. We supported the member for Exuma in the decoupling.
Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Speaker, I stood on a point of order. The member misrepresented to this parliament.
Member.
And I asked that he withdraw those remarks, Mr. Deputy, or they be struck from the record, Mr. Speaker.
Marco City, are you going to withdraw?
Not a possible chance. Mr. Deputy, the point I have made on more than one occasion, let me finish the statement to answer your question. What I've said on more than one occasion is that the clear impression by the member for Exuma and others have been that they have sold the hotel.
Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Let me be clear. The minister, the former minister of that former failed F&M administration, he made certain representation on the floor of this house. And no matter how he tries to now change his words, he misled Parliament with what he just said. I ask that he withdraw it. If he refuses to withdraw it, Mr. Deputy, I ask that you have it stricken from the record.
Marco City, is this factual?
Mr. Deputy, let me say again for the Bahamian people.
That was a question.
This administration,
honorable member. Yeah, that was a question.
I've already answered. I don't intend to withdraw. So let me just be clear.
So it's factual?
Of course it's. Right. I don't intend.
We will have that stricken from the record from Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, consistently the member for Exuma
The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama.
You sit down, I will speak. If you've completed your contribution.
Mr. Deputy, I would like the same courtesies that you extend to other members to be extended to the member for Marco City. The member for Exuma has consistently, along with colleagues, come in this house and give the clear impression that the hotel was sold. He has oversold and underdelivered.
The chair recognizes.
That is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma, Ragged Island.
You've ruled on the matter. You've ruled on the matter, Mr. Speaker. And I've indicated that we've been very clear. The member needs to now appreciate that he is in the House of Assembly. He's not in the Freeport Players Theater or the Dundas setup where he performs, Mr. Speaker. This is the House of Assembly, and we're required to be responsible with what we say and not mislead or seek to mislead, Mr. Deputy.
Yes.
To complete. There's 10 minutes or 11 minutes and 58 seconds left
Is
of
there a
this
seconder?
half-hour production. And once he finishes production, then we will take the lunch break.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House stands past 1 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated, those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House will proceed past 1 p.m. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, this administration, the member for Exuma, has consistently oversold and underdelivered in terms of the sale of the Grand Lucayan. So today, despite having supported the decoupling of the sale of the hotel and, of course, the development of the harbor, we supported them. We were cautiously optimistic. And in this House, over and over, we cautioned this administration.
Good time.
So, Mr. Deputy, the airport. Today, we have not had a partner identified, yet this administration is suggesting that they are going to have a sale, they're going to have a developed airport by 2025. In the absence of a partner, in the absence of the resources, in the absence of a design for the airport, how are you able to reasonably predict the timetable for the development of the airport? How? How is it possible? How? Overselling, under-delivering. Overselling, under-delivering.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, we're on public record outlining the plan for the Grand Bahama International Airport. But this member who now stands and acts as the leader of the opposition served in the cabinet of the former administration for 2 years. And they did nothing, Mr. Deputy.
Zero.
He is shameless, Mr. Deputy, to stand here and seemingly celebrate that nothing had been done by this administration. Mr. Deputy, since we came to office, we made deliberate and significant efforts to improve the airport that was left by them, where they did nothing. We improved lights and generators and elevators, Mr. Deputy, and we renovated the domestic terminal as is ongoing, and we brought airlift. Airlift from Florida and Charlotte and Raleigh and Toronto and Montreal, Mr. Deputy. So now he stands and he acts like he cares, Mr. Deputy. But in 2 years, he did nothing as a member of the cabinet, and a parliamentary and a representative, an MP for Marco City. He did nothing. And now he stands and he acts like he cares, Mr. Deputy. He is shameless.
One second. Yeah. I'm just trying to find the rule of relevance here, because we have to stick to the debate and let's stay focused, because we just flip-flopping all over the place. No, that's both sides. No, honorable members, that's both sides. So yeah, there's a rule of relevance. Let's stick to the debate, please. Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Mr. Deputy, I transitioned from the airport and the hotel by ending on that segment as I began. There is a problem with overselling and under-delivering, and that is emblematic of this administration. Public relations rather than delivery on substance. That's what the issue is. That's what the issue is.
Where's the deal?
And so we want to know, show us the deal. Show who is the partner for the airport. How do you know it's going to be finished in 2025? Show us the deal.
That's another promise.
When you posture as if you are the salvation of an island, then deliver. And so you have a historical record of not delivering West End and Bimini. You shouldn't get in this conversation. You have a historical record of not delivering. Mr.
Members,
Mr. Deputy.
honorable members.
I know I struck
Order.
a chord. I know I struck a chord, West End. I know I struck a chord. No footprints. You can't find a building, not a community center, not a park. I mean, just years of being there, no footprint.
Honorable members, honorable members.
But
No, Senance,
it's hurting.
Senance,
It's
yeah.
painful.
Yeah,
It's
let's,
painful.
yeah.
I can make a lot of noise in this house.
Honorable members, honorable members, members,
That's it.
Senance, Senance.
That's it. Thank you, Senance. Emasculation. Welcome back, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
And there will be order in this place.
Madam Speaker, a massive delegation went to COP27. And what was unusual about it was, Madam Speaker, the Minister for the Environment and the Minister of State for the Environment were noticeably missing. You're talking about the largest environmental conference in the world, and the two most relevant senior cabinet ministers to deal with that portfolio were missing off the trip. The question is why? The question is why?
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
The clock.
Madam Speaker.
It was at 9:53.
You may be Madam Speaker, now this member wants to act as if he is the Prime Minister, making my point of order again is
members.
My point of order again is he's misleading this place once more, Madam Speaker. I asked the member on relevance to focus on the issues at hand. The Prime Minister, in his wisdom, makes the determination as to where his resources are and what they are to be doing when, Mr. Speaker. And it's not the prerogative of the leader of the opposition.
Members, there's a member on the floor.
It's not the prerogative of the leader of the opposition to direct the Prime Minister as to where his team ought to be. So we ask again that he focus on the relevance at hand, Madam Speaker. This is going from the ridiculous now to the sublime, Madam Speaker.
I left this. Hold on, honorable members. I left these proceedings for all but less than 10 minutes, and I left us debating the mental health bill. Now, what are we now debating? What are we now debating? Now, may I exercise this rule? I'll take you to page 72. Oh, yes, go to the page. Go to number 2. 88-2. Put on my glasses so I don't miss anything, okay? The Speaker in the House or the Chairman in committee, after having called the attention of the House or committee to the conduct of a member who persists in irrelevance or in tedious repetition either of his own arguments or of the arguments used by other members in debate, may direct a member to discontinue his speech and resume his seat. Now, I have asked members to let's stick to the point. Let's stick to the point, which is the mental health bill. We will resume these other points at another date. I have a long list of speakers here, and we will stick to the mental health bill. All these other, I don't know what to call it, delays. Okay? We will stop. They will cease. And I have heard the Deputy Speaker call, and I have not heard any member comply. Okay? Now she reach. Mental health bill. And it's
Speaker.
after the 1 o'clock hour. I'm sure members want to get
Madam Speaker,
out of
let
here.
me. Sorry, you're through, Madam Speaker. Let me.
Yeah, are you through?
No, I'm not. I'm just getting started, Madam Speaker.
Okay.
Madam Speaker.
9:53 on the clock. Let's get it.
Madam Speaker, there is a tremendous amount of anxiety in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This administration is not solely responsible for that. All of us in different ways contribute to the tremendous stress and pressure our people are under. So when I come and hit this place, I come in to help relieve that pressure. A part of relieving that pressure is holding this administration accountable for the decisions that they make. Madam Speaker, we're talking about anxiety. We're talking about anxiety, Madam Speaker. We're talking about anxiety. Madam Speaker, the anxiety that many Bahamians have, even as we discuss the mental health bill, is how are they going to pay the many bills that are heaped upon their head? Because many of them are not as fortunate as many of us in this place. Madam Speaker, I raised in a previous debate the fact that the increase in fuel charge and electricity, Madam Speaker, was not automatic. That is what was asserted by members of the Davis-Cooper administration in general, the member for Fort Charlotte in particular. We laid in this House a document that clearly showed that the member for Fort Charlotte was privy to recommendations that he declined to follow that resulted in what we believe now is a $100 million plus expense on the backs of the Bahamian people. We asked him not to persist because there was clear evidence that he got the recommendation, could have relieved this burden, this pressure, this toll pressure on Bahamians, this anxiety, this increase from 10.5 cents on the fuel charge to 27.6, 163% increase in fuel charge. Madam Speaker, I'd like to further support what I had said previously about the member being fully aware. I'd like to read into your hearing and to the hearing of the public. The member who acknowledges that he received recommendations on the hedge program and responded to it. Madam Speaker, so a letter was written.
Honourable member,
a letter was written.
Haven't we addressed the hedge program?
No, Madam Speaker, I ask you to permit me to continue to do my job on behalf of the tens of thousands of Bahamians who are subjected to bills that they did not have to be subjected to. And the pressure that they face today is in part because of a failure to execute. But that's not, a failure to execute is not as bad as a failure to acknowledge that you knew that you had options that you did not pursue. And so, Madam Speaker, I wish...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fort Charlotte.
This is a point of order, and the point of order is relevance, Madam Speaker. The point of order is relevance because what the honourable member has not disclosed, and his informers ought to have shared with him, is a hedge. First of all, BPL not in a position to fund the hedge. It's a determination by the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance in October made a determination that the proposal that the honourable member is referring to was not supported. Only the Ministry of Finance can support using the public treasury's money in an undertaking which it is not persuaded at that time, given what it was before the Ministry of Finance, that it was not in the interest of the country at that time. The honorable member, Madam Speaker, has a draft cabinet paper which only could have been its address to the Minister of Finance. So they understood where the determination was to be made. The draft cabinet paper is addressed to the Minister of Finance for the Minister of Finance consideration. The Minister of Finance communicated that based on what was presented, it was not supported. It was not supported. That determination was communicated in October of 2021. And what is the relevance? It's new revelation.
In this house, I raised the question, did the minister with responsibility for Fort Charlotte or the prime minister, were they aware of the recommendations that were made? Madam Speaker, I really need your protection because this is an important point. Please, Madam Speaker, protect me from them. But I raised.
Honourable member, you have raised a question.
Yes.
As it relates to the hedge.
No, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just got back up. He can't have a double point of order and I have not even spoken.
Right.
So
I'm asking.
Can I complete my statement?
Have you raised the question about that?
No, Madam Speaker.
There's a question already.
Madam Speaker, there are multiple sides of this one issue. So I'm not sure what the member for Exome is talking about. But Madam Speaker, the member for Fort Charlotte responded, Madam Speaker, he just had a point of order. I have not spoken yet. How does he get a second point of order? Madam Speaker, here's the point. The member for Fort Charlotte has just confirmed what I asked several weeks ago. Were you aware of the recommendations that had the potential to save the Bahamian people over $100 million? His answer on his feet and the Prime Minister's answer on his feet was no. They did not see any recommendation. The member for Fort Charlotte, just on his feet, before I could lay the two documents that I have with me today, on his feet admitted that the Minister of Finance was fully aware and rejected the recommendations. Madam Speaker, he admitted on his feet that the Minister of Finance saw the recommendations and rejected it. He also indicated that he also rejected the recommendation. And so, Madam Speaker, before you answer that, you don't want.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Port Charlotte.
Madam Speaker, when this matter was raised, Madam Speaker, the rules require that if you have a question, that the question is provided, that the minister would have an opportunity to review the file, have an answer, which is really after reviewing the file, and put forward, which there are a number of questions on the notice paper.
On the notice already.
Those questions are being reviewed by the relevant technical officers, and answers are being prepared. When the honorable member raised this, as if we were in a court of law, responses were given. I have checked with the financial secretary, and I have confirmed with the financial secretary that the documents which were provided were also provided to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance, and I'll be happy to lay the response of the financial secretary. It was considered and communicated that based on what was put to the Ministry of Finance, the proposal was not accepted. and some questions were asked which were not addressed satisfactorily. But what the Ministry of Finance explained to me, Madam Speaker, what the Ministry of Finance explained to me is that any commitment of a hedge strategy would represent an obligation. BPL was not in a fiscal position to assume that itself. And therefore, through the IDB and the Ministry of Finance, both of which have the requisite technical capacity, reviewed what was put forward and did not accept it. That was a determination by the Ministry of Finance. Now, if the honorable member were to put forward a question, the Ministry of Finance will prepare the answer and provide the answer.
Put your question during notices, though, not now.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, just in case persons are just joining us. We have asked, Madam Speaker, we have asked, in case the only thing they heard, Madam
421.
Madam Speaker, the member for Fort Charlotte, in case that's all they heard for the first time, what the member of Fort Charlotte should have been answering is a question that was asked of him probably a month ago. The question was whether or not the fuel increase was inevitable, one. Secondly, he indicated on his feet, so did the Prime Minister indicate on their feet, that they were unaware of any recommendations around the hedge program, on their feet. The member for Fort Charlotte has just confirmed that not only he was aware, but the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, was aware.
Allow.
You weren't listening.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Madam Speaker, not to belabor this point, what I indicated is that subsequently I spoke with the Financial Secretary, which is what would have happened had the question been put according to the rules. An investigation would be done and answers would be prepared. And well, it is sincere. I mean, what do I have to hide? And thank you for the compliment, even though it is said. But so the Financial Secretary confirmed, Madam Speaker, and if the honorable member if the honorable member were to put forward within the rules the question, answers would be prepared by the technical people after the review of the file and put the facts forward.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, the member for Fort Charlotte has confirmed that what we were saying all along was the truth, which he denied over and over and over again. And now, finally faced with unimpeachable facts, he now points out that the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, was also aware. And so the 163% increase in electricity over 13 months is a result of the dereliction of duty. A decision, bad judgment. Would you like me to retrieve that? Yeah. Bad judgment by the Davis, I can spare you this time, Chester, the Davis administration.
What you call it?
It's a dereliction of duty. So again, what we want is for the member and the Prime Minister to confirm on their feet that they did get the recommendations and they rejected it. As a result of rejecting it, it's a 163% increase in fuel charge for the Bahamian people. It's a 35 to 45% increase in electricity for the vulnerable Bahamians that they claim that they love so much. It's a near 100% increase for those Bahamians who are middle class or who are entrepreneurs. They have misled, they have on their feet misled Parliament. And so, Madam Speaker, as I take my seat, I would like to lay the correspondence to show that we support the mental health bill. But we are expecting the Prime Minister to make the necessary decisions in light of the fact that on their feet, they have misled this Parliament. The member for Fort Charlotte misled this Parliament, and he just confirmed, so through him, he has confirmed that the Prime Minister did. That his words, his own words, that the Prime Minister was aware of the recommendations that he said I had no idea about. And so, Madam Speaker, with those few words, let me say, we have some very serious challenges in this country. We do not have a problem with members opposite working on behalf of the Bahamian people. We have a problem with parties and receptions when it's not necessary. We have a problem with people riding first class when our people can't even afford economy. We have a problem with them not paying school board workers in Grand Bahama. Can't take care of a dilapidated building and residence in Turtle Key. Can't help the flooding in North Abaco. That's what we have a problem with, Madam Speaker. We have a problem with them not addressing the proliferation of unregulated development in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, even when two members of their side say they are not doing enough, Madam Speaker. Two, North and South Abaco, standing up for their people, Madam Speaker. That's what we have a problem with, Madam Speaker. And so we ask them to do the right thing, Madam Speaker. They're sending people in almost every constituency.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Abaco.
My point of order, Madam Speaker, is to correct the statement, a misleading statement by the member. It's okay to stand in here and put on your show. That's your choice. It's okay if you want to base your career on this emotional outburst and whatever else. I was elected by the people of North Abaco because of my character. I'm speaking to the speaker, but I'm looking at him. I was elected because of my character. I don't spend much time talking because I'm a person of action. Please, when you refer to the member of North Abaco, let it be factual. Don't mislead this country to believe that you and I just have side conversation where I've given you information about my good party and government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Well, if you want to refer to the papers in your contribution, please state that. However, when you stand here, forgive me, Madam Speaker, however, when the member stand here and make a bold statement about what the member for North Abaco says, he leads me with the impression that he's speaking some experience he had with me. The gentleman and I, under no circumstances, have ever had a conversation. And I am not at all going to sit silent while the opposition continue to utilize, I guess, what he called my Ricky or my inexperience in this place to further strengthen his debate or his argument or his outburst in his contribution. It ain't gonna work for me. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Firstly, it's definitely misleading. I actually commended the ministers and this administration for actually taking a positive step forward in our ever-escalating problem. But what I did say is over 35 years of F&M representation in Abaco, nothing of significance was done and has caused the plight that we're in today. That's what I did say. And I would further that by saying that in 35 years of representation, they have not only caused the plight that we're in today, but they systematically dismantled most of the departments in Abaco for them to function properly, closing the youth and sports and culture office, dismantling public works, dismantling many other departments that we are having to now fix and rectify and bring Abaco back to where it was before. That is what I did say, for clarification.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, I'd just like to read into the hearing of the public. So this is not about, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, this is not about private, Madam Speaker, this is not about, Madam Speaker, let me finish the point. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, let me finish the point. Madam Speaker, let me finish. Madam Speaker, do the right thing. Madam Speaker, I wish to just conclude this thought. Madam Speaker, members, Madam Speaker, ask him to open this again. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker's recognized me. Madam Speaker.
Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Grand.
Madam Speaker, you recognize.
Honorable members, yes, I recognize you, Honorable Member. I recognize you, and your time is now completed. I have Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable member, let me say this. Let me say this. I recognized you. You rose to your feet, and your time is now expired. Honorable member. Honorable member. Honorable member. Honorable member, let me say this. Let me say this. And I listened to your speech in its entirety. And I understand where you were going with some of it and where you wasn't going with some of it. But let me tell you something. At the onset, when we began here this morning, one thing this sitting member said and this speaker said is that we would not move away from the mental health bill today. And let me tell you something, the lack of order, the lack of disrespect for this chair is just overwhelming. Okay? Overwhelming. And so, you want me to give you extra time when you did not comply with the order of this chair. When you did not, you were talking about hedge, you were talking about so many other things, drawing all kinds of other conclusions. Now, if you want to get back, when we come back, you can rise on your points of orders. I will, whatever. You will rise. No, hold on, let me finish. You will rise on your point of order when other members are speaking, if you want to speak to anything that they're saying. But rise up right now, I will ask the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini to move for the suspension. I will now ask, listen here, I am taking charge of this house. I am taking charge of this process.
Abuse, you have no point of order. We now move, Madam Speaker.
And seconded that the business of this. Thank you, Honorable Member.
Pay no attention to the rules.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of this house stands suspended until the 3 p.m. hour. All those in favor shall remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this house stands suspended until 3 p.m.